My trip began leaving the fabulous Ajwa Sultanahmet. It took about 20 minutes for the Uber to come, which made me start to panic that I wouldn't get to the airport in time, as the ride was nearly an hour to reach Istanbul International Airport. However, we made it with time to spare, and I headed to the business class check-in counter, which had its own separate entrance far from where I was dropped. If you're departing Istanbul, make sure your driver drops you at the premium check-in area so you can avoid the baggage scan line. I had to wait a few minutes at the business class check-in before someone was ready to check my documents and print my boarding pass. Once in hand, I headed to the lounge. Alright, so a quick catch up because I finally made it to the Turkish Airlines lounge with about an hour before my boarding time, and just everything about so far the departure from my hotel has been just a little bit more stressful than it needed to be. Getting an Uber, and then the driver ultimately charged me more than the trip should have cost. This is something that I've talked about in my coming to Turkey, coming to Istanbul videos, is that you really can't trust the taxi drivers. Even sometimes with Uber, the final price is not what they will enter into the app. That wasn't even really like my biggest issue. Once I got to the airport and I did the check-in, the opposite thing happened to me as from when I flew domestic, which is that actually in this business class flight I was only allotted 30 kilograms of checked luggage, and I was over apparently by 6. And he didn't even measure my carry-on suitcase, which I know is over 8 kilograms. I ended up having to pay 76 euros for the extra 6 kg from here to Madrid. That's pretty aggressively priced. And then just, going through like everything here, going through the security, going through customs, going through even the lounge, like none of these people smile. I don't understand what it is about the Turkish culture. Again, maybe I've spent too much time in Asia, specifically Thailand and Bali, where they just have this culture of friendliness and warmth, but it's so just cold and aloof here, and I'm not used to it, and it's really off-putting, to be honest. Like, I'm going to say something that, almost I don't want to say, but it's honestly the truth. Like, I'm really glad that I came to Turkey. I'm very glad that I visited, but I don't think that I would come back to this country. It's just like one of those things you check off the bucket list. You did it, and I don't feel the need that, to come back here. It's just like the people are not warm enough to merit a revisit. There are other countries and people that I would prefer to be amongst. So that being said, this lounge seems quite nice. I'm going to give you a little bit of a tour. Maybe get something to drink to refresh, just because, again, the kind of whole security process and the check-in, even through business class, was not seamless and not stress-free. I just kind of want to get on the plane and hope that the onboard service is better than the ground service. The lounge had a selection of both hot and cold dishes. As I had just had breakfast earlier from the hotel, I wasn't particularly hungry. There was also a small bar cart of self-service wine. The lounge itself was expansive with many nooks and crannies. There was a TV room, a children's area, and intriguingly, a model train set that ran through a miniature Istanbul. At a certain point, I needed to use the bathroom and was shocked when I entered a stall with an Indian-style squat toilet. This isn't the type of thing I would expect to see in a business class lounge, or really at any bathroom outside of a few countries in Southeast Asia. I think this was the only one though, as I checked afterwards and found a regular toilet in another stall. I started to feel claustrophobic with all the people hanging around the dining area and wandered to the other side of the lounge, on the right, after you enter, to find luggage lockers and mini pods which offered privacy and a good workspace with both USB and regular power outlets in each. As I was leaving, I realized there was a machine to access the lounge Wi-Fi that I had neglected when I walked in. With boarding now being called on the monitor, I headed to my gate, which was actually about a 15 to 20 minute walk from the lounge at what felt like the end of the world, if not the end of the terminal. They were checking everyone's health documents before stamping boarding passes. Soon the line opened for business class passengers to board. I made it to my seat 2A. This is an Airbus A330. It's actually my first time ever flying Turkish Airlines business class, and it seems like a comfortable enough cabin. I'm really hoping that there's nobody sitting next to me on this flight today, but I doubt it because it didn't seem like there were that many business class passengers lining up. So I think it's about a 4-hour flight to Madrid, and yes, I'm going to be spending the next 2 weeks in Madrid. I'm really looking forward to it. I've actually never been to Spain before, but I do speak Spanish from living in Mexico for 2 years, so I'm a bit rusty, but I think it will come back to me, and I will be showing you a bit of the service on this flight, what you might be able to expect during flying in business class during this pandemic on Turkish Airlines. If the ground experience is any indication, I don't have the highest expectations and hopes, but we'll see.
Lemonade, raspberry, orange juice, and
Lemonade,
still water.
please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Luckily, my seat neighbor was just these useless hygiene packs. There was no amenity kit, which was fine for such a short flight. I browsed the entertainment system but couldn't find anything that I wanted to watch. I actually ended up watching the flight map almost the entire time. There was tons of foot space, at least for me who's 5'7" in a shoe, and the seat could be converted to a flat bed. Soon, menus were passed out and I was delighted by the choices. There was also an alcohol section that included champagne. We did seem a bit delayed, but soon we pushed back and began taxiing on the runway. You could still see the piles of snow on the ground from the snow days Istanbul had been having the week prior. It was good to know I was headed to a warmer destination. I did try to access the onboard Wi-Fi, which was complimentary for business class passengers, but had connectivity issues. They say insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, so I must be insane as I press this button 100 times. The stewardess advised they were having problems and had to reset the system. I gave up trying when lunch was delivered on a delightful platter. We're now 30 minutes into the flight and the food service has begun, which is always a great excuse to take off your mask. And I'm really quite delighted by the presentation. It's really lovely. I ordered the sea bass. I actually don't see too much actual sea bass on the plate. I do see some shrimp and I see some other types of fish that are rolled around, but very beautifully presented. And I just think how cute are these little salt and pepper shakers with the spires that remind you of the tops of the mosques in Istanbul. Just this little attention and touches to detail, I find are very charming. I'm not drinking alcohol as of right now because it's an afternoon flight and it's also a short flight, so I don't really want to get to Madrid drunk, especially because I'm staying in an Airbnb. And last night the guy wrote me these instructions in Spanish, which I speak but not 100%. And I have to go and get the keys in some very convoluted way that's not at the Airbnb, so I think if I'm drunk, it's going to be a lot harder to find and get into my Airbnb once I get to Spain. Instead, I'm sticking with the really actually delicious lemonade that they also offered as the welcome drink. And what else is on this plate? Some cheese, a little salad, and some chocolatey dessert that I'm not going to eat. But, bon appetit!
For a short while. Thank you for your cooperation.
I was wrong, so that delightful assortment of seafood that I just enjoyed was only the amuse-bouche, was only the appetizer, and the hot meal is the sea bass, which has just come first wrapped in tin foil, and then in a some sort of like a plastic bag, so it has to be opened. It's hard to tell actually how good it's going to taste from how it looks, because it just sort of looks like a lumpy weird thing. It does have julienne vegetables. Just strange looking, but I'm sure it's going to taste better than it looks. This sea bass did indeed taste better than it looked, and after my meal I opted for a digestive herbal tea. At some point the Wi-Fi did start working, but it was so slow as to be useless. Comfortably fed, I turned my seat into a bed and napped for about an hour. Shortly before landing, I went to the toilet to see an assortment of molten brown products. Thus concludes this flight to Madrid, just under 4 hours. It was a really pleasant experience despite the not so great things that I had to say about the on the ground experience. The air experience was really nice and I had tons and tons of space to myself. The only thing that I would say is just that in this configuration it is a bit lacking privacy in the business class cabin. Yes, as I was saying before the millionth announcement that nobody needed to hear, I had a good trip, and this is my first time ever in Spain, so I am so excited to get to discover Madrid over the next 2 weeks. Follow along in my adventures, subscribe to my channel. I'm Adrian Field, and until the next video, take care guys, and I'll see you later.